You've spent years researching users, mapping journeys, and iterating on other people's problems. But when it comes to your own career, you freeze. You feel stuck. You're not broken. You've just stopped using your own processes on yourself. So stick around because today we're going to talk about how you can UX your own career and figure out a path forward. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas, unsure where to start? This episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need. Search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. My team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. So you ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are regular here, you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. As always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So you've been working a long time, you might be senior mid-level, and then you feel stuck. You have all these processes, you've mastered the craft, but you still feel stuck. Well, maybe it's time to look inward and UX yourself. How often do we do that? Probably not enough. I think we should do it more. So I am so excited to have the one and only Sarah Doody on the show today. We're going to talk all about how to take those things that we already do every day at work, probably pretty damn well, and use them on ourselves in our own career. Sarah Doody is a UX researcher, product designer, and UX career coach who founded the Career Strategy Lab. She helps companies and teams understand the people and purpose behind the products that they create. Since 2004, Sarah has leveraged the power of UX research, product design, and storytelling to help teams build the right products and features the first time, reducing the costly risk of rework. And in 2017, she expanded her impact into UX career coaching and launched the Career Strategy Lab, a UX job search accelerator that helps UX and product professionals secure 5-figure salary increases and thrive once they're hired. Sarah, I am so excited to have you on the show. Honored to have you here, actually. Welcome to Beyond UX Design. How's it going?
I'm great. Happy it's Thursday. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost Friday. Almost. We got a little bit ways to
Almost.
go, but we're almost there. Normally, I ask people, like, tell us a little bit about you. I think most people probably know you. You're relatively popular in the UX industry and beyond. So instead of all that, if you want to go hear about Sarah, you got your own show and all that stuff as well. People can learn all about you there. But tell us a little bit about this idea of feeling stuck. How often do you come across clients and people in your courses and stuff that maybe just feel stuck and need to take a step back and look inward?
Yeah, great question. And it goes to the origin story of how I pivoted my own career completely unexpectedly into this world of UX career coaching. And if we rewind back to 2017, my inbox was just inundated with emails, LinkedIn messages, Twitter messages, etc., of people telling me just this. They're stuck in their job search primarily with their portfolio, right? If you can remember back to 2017, no one was really talking about UX job search, UX portfolios, etc. And long story short, that's how I ever got into this. So it was really like ironically, maybe not ironically, my user research skills just noticing this, right? But I see this all the time. It's not just people are stuck with the literal making of the portfolio, making of the resume, et cetera. There's so many underlying factors, mainly around confidence, mindset, which we can talk more about, lack of clarity, or what I call like identity fog in your career, and trying to figure out, who am I? Where am I here? Where do I want to go next? And that applies to every stage of the job search.
I love identity. Would you identity fog, career
Identity
fog,
fog,
identity
yeah.
fog. I love that actually. Yeah, that's like a perfect thing too. I have a whole section in my conversation guy actually would talk about identity and how designers, for some reason, we tend to, identify as our role and our
Yes.
job. But I want to talk a little bit about this because I feel like before we get into this idea of I feel stuck. I think a lot of people they might not even realize that they're stuck, and they might not even realize that they need to start thinking
Yep.
differently about how they so if you're listening, I think it's mid to senior level people tend to feel this because a lot of people, the junior, they kind of shoot up to senior, then they get stuck at senior and they feel like I don't know what to do next. What are some symptoms of that? People who might be listening that might not realize that they are stuck before we even get into this whole idea of thinking inward. How do they even know that they might need to look inward to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll try and remember all the symptoms of identity fog because I have a whole like presentation about this. But a couple of them, like a telltale one is someone asks you in an interview, tell me about yourself. Like, how'd you get to where you are right now in your career? And you don't have a succinct answer for that or like an elevator pitch, right? Major sign that you are not clear on what you do and the value you bring. Another one I see is maybe people do have a little elevator pitch or about me, but they actually don't believe it. And I see this a lot where people may have a strong resume, portfolio, elevator pitch, etc. But if you don't actually believe those things in that, it's potentially gonna come through in those really critical kind of first impression points in interviews, right? Like with the recruiter on like a screening call or that first hiring call, et cetera. So that is another symptom. Like I often say, if you feel like you're an imposter, which I know many of us feel. I myself do things and I think, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm on the right track here." But I think it's a big sign that you may doubt your skills, your experience, and the value you bring. This is the last thing I'll say about this, but one of the reasons that based on the I don't know how many at this point, like hundreds of hours or thousands of hours of conversations I've had. One of the main reasons that people lack the confidence, well, I guess there's two, comparison, right? Especially with social media, it's so easy to compare yourselves to other people. It's human nature, right? Like even I was in yoga class yesterday. I'm coming back from an injury and I know I'm not doing as well in yoga as I once could and it really annoys me because I'm like a goal-oriented person. But I have to remember like people I cannot compare myself to all these other people. And you know what? This is like a little bit of a personal story, but I was at the pool as part of my rehab and I was swimming and I felt, oh, I'm not swimming very well. And then the lady in the lane next to me, she said, "You're so good." And I thought, what a great example of you never know someone's circumstances. So comparison big time. And then the last thing I'll say is the confidence gets eroded because of the environment that you're currently in or you've previously been in, meaning like maybe you had not a great boss or team members that were jerks and they were eroding your confidence and like telling you you weren't good at things that you thought were great at. So I think that was a little bit of a long answer, but there's so many factors involved, Jeremy?
I love that. Yeah, the relative aspect of this is really interesting. It's interesting. We look at people that have been doing this for 20 years. A lot of people have been doing this for a long time. And you look at like, well, how did that person get there and there? I want to be there. But you're like, well, they're like 15 years ahead of me. Like they've been doing this for a long time. You can't expect to be this far along, 2, 3 years into your career. And that whole idea of just like other people in different situations, I love that. Something you mentioned before about like an elevator pitch, this is something I think a lot of people haven't even thought about their elevator pitch. And whenever they get into a job interview or even when they start a new job and they do the round robin, oh, tell us about you. Well, it's like on the fly and they're just thinking of stuff and then they ramble. And, I wonder how many people have actually sat down and actually listed out, like, what do I say in that elevator pitch? How do I make it more concise? What do I want to say?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And a lot of us probably haven't done that. And if you sit down and think about that and you aren't sure what to put or you don't believe those things, I think first step maybe is like actually sitting down to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us have not, unfortunately, which again, when we think about like UXing ourselves, like, would you show up to a meeting, a design critique, a design review, where you have to explain something and not prepare for it? But when
Yeah.
it comes to something like a job interview, as critical as that, so few people forget to prepare for something as simple as like, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing everyone's going to ask. And so, anyway, I find that really interesting. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
Yeah, it's like the same care and attention and passion that so many UX people put into the products they work on. It's just like it goes out the window when it comes to your own career. And I have this whole philosophy, the product of you is also the name of my book, which is not out yet, but the product of you, it's like a Venn diagram if you think about it. And in the middle is you, the product of you. And the three parts of the Venn diagram are you have to be able to design yourself, you have to be able to market yourself, and you have to be able to sell yourself. And how did I come up with this? It's the same as a product.
sure.
Like products have to have solid design, marketing, and sales. You can't, it's like a stool, right? You can't have just great design. And if your marketing or your sales are terrible, that great product can't stand on its own, right? So it's the same exact stuff that applies to our careers.
Yeah, I love this. So I love this metaphor, and I think you could extend it. And I'm probably going to go off our conversation guide and maybe go off script a bit. But what I think is really interesting, and I think we're going to talk about this at some point, or maybe we could even talk about it now, is so many designers, I think, just they forget that our job is transactional.
Hmm.
Like, we are there to get paid. We are there to do work, and someone is there to accept the work and our labor and hand us, hopefully, a fair compensation for that labor. But designers, we have this like altruistic ego about us that like we're saving the world and we're solving big problems, and when we don't get to do those things, we bang our head against the wall and feel like we're a total failure because we didn't change the entire organization, and nobody likes design or nobody listens to the designers in our low design maturity org. We were unable to like improve it or influence them. But like, were we ever going to do that in the first place? Like, you're there to get paid and you're there to do a thing.
Yeah.
And just like when in the marketplace, right? Like, we're creating a product. I'm creating a product to sell. You will pay me for that thing. Hopefully you find value. Hopefully I get adequately compensated for that thing that I've made. And it is very similar. I have to market it. I have to have sales. I have to have like all that stuff. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. And it's funny when I think about just design and I don't know if like other like product managers, I don't know. I've never talked to a product manager that's like feels the same way about their job that most designers do. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but I find that really fascinating to think about. And I think most designers probably I have this ego. I don't know. That's my
Yeah.
observation at least.
I notice it all the time, and I see it quite literally play out in these elevator pitches where so many of them sound like I'm a product designer who wants to use research and achieve business goals and make products people love, right? That is a good kind of what's the right way to say this, like paraphrase of so many. But I actually screenshotted one I saw this morning on LinkedIn. I'm not going to say who it is, and I'll leave a few words out so people don't go Google this. But this person's LinkedIn headline, like the text below their name, it says, I help people design user experiences that delight. And I thought, well, that's nice, but what I may do with this example is do a LinkedIn post and say, no recruiter or hiring manager is sitting there typing in product designer that creates delightful products. And once I saw one, and this person's LinkedIn profile said, I think they were a user researcher or something, and said, I'm a user researcher, passionate about, insights. And I also love milkshakes, football, and Jesus. And I was like, no, this is a waste of precious real estate on your LinkedIn. You made me think of something, and now I forget. It tied in so well to what you said, though. But there's just one example of where I see this play out. And I think it's like when you were in college or high school and you had to write an essay. Um, and if you skip that step of coming up with a solid thesis, you've written a book. So you can imagine if you just started writing without the anchor of a thesis for your book, how is that going to go? And the same applies to our careers. And The same applies to products, right? Products without roadmaps, it's like a chicken with its head cut off. And I think you said this, but like teams that don't have roadmaps get stuck in this labor and time intensive rework process. And that is why UX professionals are redoing their portfolio 5, 10 times and applying to 400 jobs. And I'm not exaggerating in interviews. It's because they're stuck and they don't have a thesis.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting. You mentioned the lack of a vision and a roadmap. Ironically, this is where a lot of designers feel like, oh, I want a seat at the table. I want to help with strategy. I want to help with vision. And a lot of these same people are the ones that are not getting that seat at the table because they aren't doing those things and applying them
Yeah.
to their own. Having a thesis for your own, I love that, a thesis for your own career. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of applying our own process, our own UX process to our own career. What does that look like in a practical sense from your perspective?
Yeah. So if we think back to that Venn diagram with the circles of design, marketing, and sales, that design part, that's step number one. And if you think of what we do when we're designing products, it starts with research. And so one of the things that I do with my career coaching clients, we divide it into sprints. And our first sprint is all about creating your career roadmap. And it's essentially a user research project on yourself where you are doing these steps of number one, looking backwards in your career to figure out what are your skills, what are your hard skills, soft skills, industry experience, like specific type of product experience, life experience, specific education, etc, and identifying that, but not just saying, oh, I do user research, but getting more detailed about, are there certain methods you're more experienced with? Are you the type of researcher that also can go make a prototype? Are you more like purely in research, right? So there's reflection on yourself, but then there's also the element of seeking feedback from other people, just like we do with products, right? So I recommend those people might be former bosses, colleagues, clients that you have good relationships with, maybe people in other departments, even like past freelance clients, if you were doing that. And maybe you've even experienced this. I know I have, but when you start to ask other people for visibility into how they perceive you and your strengths, etc., it does two things. It can uncover blind spots that you have because sometimes you have these skills that are just so natural to you, you just don't even realize like how powerful that is. But also it can help pump you up in terms of if you have skills that you think, "Oh, I'm not really good at user research because your boss was a jerk or your team was a jerk and made you think you're bad at that," or like presentations or something. That exercise can also be really valuable. And then what you do is you just, well, step two is then think forward to where you want to go in your career, identify skill gaps and things like that. And then with all that information, you can create this career roadmap, but also this idea of this elevator pitch. I specifically use the phrase a compass statement instead of an elevator pitch because when you have a strong compass statement, it serves as a literal compass in your career and your job search. A couple of examples. Which projects should I include in my portfolio? Well, the compass statement will have the answer. Should I apply to this job or not? I've had my career coaching clients say, I had multiple job offers, and that compass statement helped remind me of my goals, etc. And it helped me decide which job was right for me.
I love that idea of a compass statement
Yeah.
instead of an elevator pitch. Because the thing I think a lot of people, when they think about that idea of an elevator pitch, one of the things I hear designers say all the time is like, I just feel dirty, like advocating for myself. And
Yeah.
I don't like showing off and stuff like that. And so instead of calling it elevator pitch implies like I'm trying to sell something. People don't
Yeah.
like selling stuff. But reframing it, I think sometimes that's all it takes is just a reframe. Just calling it something else
Yeah.
it does wonders. And thinking of it as like my guiding North Star principle, it's the thing I'm using to determine if I'm heading in the right direction. Hence the compass. I love that. I love that name.
Yeah.
But I love this idea too of like UXing yourself and your job search. And when I think about that, there's just so many parallels to our work every day. A few off the top of my head is just researching the companies that you want to apply for and
Mhm.
figuring out like, is that the right job for me? Or if that is the right job for me, figuring out what they're looking for so that I can speak to them. Because who's the audience of my portfolio? It's not other designers, it's the
Yeah.
hiring managers and the recruiters where I want to work, not even everywhere. Because something that this is again, maybe the most important takeaway I think for me when it comes to UXing yourself is the critical thought that we often lose when it comes to our own job search or our own career. And what I mean by that is there's a million experts online, right? You and I would consider you and me both like, we're posting stuff online all the time.
Yeah.
There's a million experts and we all have opinions and thoughts, not even opinions, maybe just empirical evidence that based on our own
Mhm.
experience that backs up our own advice.
Yep.
But it could be completely different. So in that case, right, if my advice is backed up by my own experience, your advice is backed up by your own experience, and the 1,000 other people are also, assuming good intent and they're not just making stuff up, backed up by their own experience, that advice might not apply to you, right? And so
Yep.
thinking about your compass statement, thinking about your career roadmap, then putting some critical thought into the people that you're accepting advice from. When you're going and doing research, you're going to hear people say one thing and you're going to hear a bunch of different users and you might put it up on do like a mapping exercise and there's a bunch of stickies and you're going to look at them and say, well, what makes sense here? What themes am I seeing? The same kind of thing I think applies for the advice that you get on how to build a perfect, quote unquote, perfect portfolio or
Yep.
a quote unquote, perfect resume. That advice, you can't just take it all in and try to internalize it. And I think a lot of people I've talked to, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. They're like, well, all these people did conflicting advice. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to do.
Yep.
And I think going back to this idea of UXing yourself, that critical thought, I think is the first thing I see go. I don't know if you have experienced that, but I find that really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I see so many people stuck in information gathering and information vetting mode, like you said. And I think it, when we're creating products, one thing that really stood out to me is just how easily teams waste time and money by continuing to produce output without thinking of the quality of that output. And I think the reason this happens is because when you have something to show for the time you spent working on your resume or portfolio, you feel like you've made progress. But after the second weekend of working your portfolio and applying to jobs and you're still not getting interviews, that is a sign that you are operating probably without a strategy or a compass, right? And also, you're just like at this buffet of information from the internet, and you're just, it's like when you design a product and you've probably had this experience where people are like, well, Apple did this and Google did this, and we should take this pattern and like piece it all together. And then it's this totally disjointed product. And the same thing happens with people and their portfolios, because I think people would rather just keep like moving stuff around on a screen than sit back and be still and be quiet and figure out the root problems, because that's the hard part.
I love that. So it's something for me that's been relatively new is this idea of experimentation as it comes
Mm,
to UX design. And
yes.
so I want to talk a little bit about this because I think a big part of UX now should be things like experimentation and how do we run experiments on ourselves. A little background on me. I spent about a decade in large internal IT software, right? Very slow, not a lot of experimentation. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, how do we improve time on task? How do we make our employees more efficient? Things like that. But just about a year ago, I started at a commercial company now doing more like B2C type stuff. And we've been dabbling a lot more with what I would maybe consider growth design, which is like, we've got an opportunity. We got this canvas on maybe our sales site or something. How do we convert? What if we change the icon color? What if we change the icon? What if we change that button CTA slightly? How does that improve our metrics one way or another?
Hmm.
And when I think about job searching, just like you said, we get all this stuff, we apply for 400 jobs. One, we aren't really experimenting and trying new things. But two, I don't even think people are setting these things up to be experiments to say what I did was or was not useful,
Yep.
And so I want to talk a little bit about this idea of experimentation. How can we as designers take maybe it's part of job hunting, but maybe even just part of our career growth in general, how can we take that idea of like growth design, experimenting, and apply that as part of our UXing our self
Yeah.
process.
I want to just go back to that example you gave of you guys trying to change the icon and change this and change that. And I think I love experiments. Like, I always have experiments running. They're not always like the most statistically correct. They're my just quick and dirty experiments that work for me because I'm in charge. So I'm okay with the level of detail. But one thing I think that people sometimes get wrong with experiments is getting, like, for your example, it sounds like there was a bit of a hyper focus on the icon and the text on the icon and this and that. But what if the solution was not in that interface, but what if you sent some emails that educated people on the benefits of whatever feature you're trying to get them to use, right? So I think it's an important exercise of being able to, well, like product development, like being able to zoom in and zoom out, not just once in this nice little double diamond converge diverge stuff, but constantly be zooming in and zooming out because the solution might be in a different part of the product or in a different part of your resume, portfolio, the emails you're sending, etc. So I'll pause there before I answer the other question.
I love that because, like, at some point, I want to get into, and I want to hear the rest of what you have to say, but like tracking those experiments to say,
Yeah.
like, is this actually effective? Am I just wasting my time? Was that slight tweak to my headline on my resume that useful? Did it work? And I want to get there, but yeah, just I love that. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the tracking part, or maybe you had another thing you were going to follow up on
Yeah.
that, but
So regarding these experiments in your job search, you if you're a purist researcher, you have to be okay with having this be a little rough. But I would say one of the things I see people not doing is tailoring their resume and tailoring their portfolio for the jobs they're applying to. And the pushback, because I hear it all the time, is that's not fair. We shouldn't have to do this. It takes up so much time, etc. And my stance on tailoring is we're not saying spend 20 hours making a new resume for everything and a new portfolio for every job you apply to. It's small little parts of it that you could tweak. So, with that elevator pitch, compass statement, it may be a paragraph long, but you also need to be able to have the one sentence version of it that goes at the top of your resume, for example. So that is a really easy thing to tailor based on the job you're applying to. And I would say to people, if you're applying to jobs and your resume does not have a one sentence summary of who you are at the top, add that and then apply and see what happens. That would be a good experiment. Another experiment with portfolio and tailoring your portfolio. Of course, you can tailor that elevator pitch about me slide in your portfolio. This is easier when your portfolio is a presentation, which I'm not I don't advocate for people to spend time and energy and money making a website if they're in a job search right now. However, when your portfolio is a presentation, it's a lot easier to rearrange the order of the presentations, right? Or case studies. Or if you're more senior and you have 6 possible case studies, let's not apply with all 6. Let's apply with the 2 or 3 that are really, really aligning with that job you're applying to. And then I would say, see what happens. There's so many other experiments. People could do one easy one for LinkedIn because I'm noticing this phenomenon now with my career coaching clients where some of them are not even needing to necessarily have a job search because jobs are coming to them. And
wow, okay.
how do jobs come to them? It is because their LinkedIn profile is optimized enough that recruiters and hiring managers can find them. And in August, this woman, Laura, the CEO found her on
Wow.
LinkedIn, reached out. She never applied, had interviews, got hired with one project in her portfolio.
Oh, geez. It's awesome.
If your LinkedIn is not fully filled out, if your LinkedIn headline just says your job title and current company, that means you should go update it with something more specific and hopefully something that just doesn't say I'm a researcher that likes milkshakes and football and Jesus.
Unless it's like a football milkshake Jesus company, then in that case,
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Like, it's possible, but
So let me ask you this: how do you feel about having something like AI or ChatGPT write those headlines? Do you feel like that's a good starting
yeah,
point, or how do
I
you feel about that?
I think ChatGPT AI is a great tool for refining, but I think that it hallucinates enough and it uses so much jargon and boilerplate language that I think it my prediction is it could easily spit out generic, vague, I'm a researcher that wants to change the world stuff. Why? Because the internet is filled with so many UX portfolio websites that say that. A couple of years ago, I did a Google search for, in quotations, like UX designer and then quotations, products that change the world. And it was like pages of portfolio websites that all use that same phrasing. So we have to get away from this boilerplate way that we talk about ourselves.
Yeah. So just like anything else, I think with ChatGPT, use it, maybe brainstorm,
Yeah.
but for the love of God, don't copy paste.
No.
So I want to talk about something else as it relates to UXing ourselves. And that is, we talked about the idea of running experiments, but there's also this idea of metrics. So,
Mm.
knowing whether or not what we're doing is working towards that metric up or down, and if we're getting better or worse. So I'm curious as far as metrics go. I could think of a bunch off the top of my head, but I'm curious if you have any sort of generic metrics, or maybe it's just individualized, but metrics that people should be thinking about to know if they're on the right track or not as they're running these experiments.
Yeah. Yeah. The first metric I want to know for any job seeker is how many jobs have you applied to and how many interviews have you been invited to? And what's your application to interview conversion rate? Because I have so many emails and so many form responses of people literally saying 400 jobs. I applied to 400. I applied to 200. I applied to 100 and I have not had a single interview. And I I often try and think of myself as the product manager for the job search of UX people and product people. When you think of a product manager, I use this analogy sometimes, but let's say you're a startup and you're in beta and you launch your beta sign up or beta version or something, and 0 people sign up for the beta. The product manager, and a month goes by, right? The product manager isn't just going to be like, well, let's leave it for another month and let's spend more money on advertising and marketing to see if we get more signups, right? That product manager is going to be like, what the heck is going on? We need to figure out why 5,000 people a day are hitting the webpage and 0 are signing up. And the same applies to your job search. And I don't have an exact number, but just as a gut, I would say even if you apply to 50 jobs, that is a yellow flag that something is not working in, I would say, the combination of your LinkedIn resume and portfolio, because those are like the first impression points. And I say we have to look at all 3 of them because every person vetting candidates is a human. They don't all follow the exact same process. Some start with portfolio, some start with LinkedIn, some start with resume. So you have to give all 3 of those equal attention.
I love that last call out. It's people often assume, or I guess I don't know if people assume this, or maybe it's just the advice that's given is hiring managers want to see A, B, and C. Recruiters want to see X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And it's just not true. You could generalize for sure, but these are humans, and recruiters are not monolithic, and they all have individual perspectives, and some believe this, some believe that, some believe any combination in between. And so again, part of your research though, like finding out the companies and the people that work there, what does this team that's hiring, what is that hiring manager on that team I really want to work for? What are they looking for?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. That's a very good call out. The thing I'm actually kind of curious about is when we think about metrics and tracking different things, there's, and I've talked to recruiters who say this is not true, and I believe them, but there's maybe the misconception out there that ATS bots, the AI is rejecting me before anyone ever sees anything.
Mhm.
How do we know if those 50 applications that ghosted me were because I just applied too late, or I didn't have the right keywords, or it was just like they already filled the position and it wasn't even real to begin with? I'm curious, is
Yeah.
there any way for us to track that or figure that out and see is it one thing or the other?
Yep. So I don't know a way to figure out, like, were you automatically rejected by AI or something like that? Like, regarding trying to find out if you've applied to 50 jobs and not had an interview, did you get stuck in the ATS is kind of the question we're trying to answer. And The my opinion is the only way you could truly find out is if you ask. And I know that so many candidates say, I ask for feedback and I don't get feedback, right? I follow up and I get ghosted. And in episode 143 of my podcast, the Career Strategy Podcast, I interviewed a VP of people at this fintech company called Narmi. And we got into this. And she used an example from her own job search where she essentially said the likelihood that someone will provide feedback is really dependent on how you ask for feedback. And I don't remember the exact phrasing, but she gives an example in that episode of exact phrasing of how she herself followed up after an interview or applying to a job. And the key here is don't just reply or email and say, can you give me some feedback? You have to be more specific. So I'm going to make this up on the fly, but let's say you got to an interview and you didn't move along in the process. You could, instead of saying, can you give me some feedback? Better way to say that would be like, could you let me know what things about my experience did not align with what you're looking for? That is a lot more specific. And in life in general, the more specific question you ask, the easier it is for someone to reply. It's don't make me think, right? Um, but back to the idea of the ATS the applicant tracking system and or AI like automatically rejecting people. So one thing that I think people are forgetting is like this has been happening long before AI became all the rage. And I know this because I just interviewed Patrick Neum for my podcast 2 days ago. He works at a company that makes an ATS software. And in when you set up a job posting, you can identify some of the questions as essentially knockout questions, just like when you're recruiting for user research interviews, at least the way I do it. There's always a few questions that I ask that are intended to flag people who are 100% not a fit, right? Companies do that too. Great example. What country are you in or what state are you in, right? Because companies, they're not trying to be jerks or like gatekeep the ability to hire people. If you've ever owned a business, hiring people in different states and different countries is a beast, expensive, it's time consuming, it's not within the realm of every company's capabilities. So they have these knockout questions, and you could be getting identified as not meeting criteria as some knockout questions that might be in there also.
All right, so I want to shift a little bit to our just idea of the career roadmap in general. And we've talked a lot about applying for jobs, which I think is incredibly important because we can't get there if we can't apply. But I want to maybe take a step back, thinking about this idea of the future and where I'm going and what does really success look like for me? And
Mm.
obviously, what success looks like for me is very different from you and everybody else. And so I want to talk about like challenge that narrative of, traditional success as being like a FANG product design
Yeah.
job and things like that. And you've talked a lot about your experience, rejecting Google, for instance, and finding success, obviously, outside of FANG. But I'm curious, what is it about? Maybe it's social media. We talked a little bit about social media earlier, sort of just making every product designer think like if they don't get a FANG job, they're a failure.
Yeah. I I don't know where that came from. I think it's just maybe it's the comparison syndrome that is out there so prevalently, especially with social media. I think too, there's this assumption that if you have a FANG company on your resume, it means you're going to be automatically at the top of the list if you apply for a job or something. And I just think that that ship has sailed a little bit. Could it be beneficial in a job search? Maybe, but I don't think it's just an automatic ticket to getting hired really quickly. So I think people just need to be really careful and mindful about this because I think it just creates a lot of pressure. And then you may get hired at one of those companies, but maybe 6 months in, you're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And then you're either stuck because you want to stay and earn like bonuses or whatever, It's kind of the golden handcuffs, right?
I've talked to a ton of designers. To be fair, I've talked to a lot of designers who love working at FANGs and would never trade it for the world.
Yep.
I've also talked to a lot of them, probably more of them than I've said. I've talked to actually liked it, that were so stressed out, like crying on their lunch breaks and stuff because they just couldn't deal with the way people treated them,
Yeah.
the politics of it all. For when I talk about like politics, like a lot as sort of a necessary thing at big organizations. I'm talking about Game of Thrones type
Yeah.
politics where, it's literally like, I'm going to get a promotion and you're not, I'm going to stab you in the back and do whatever I can to make sure you get fired.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff happened quite a bit. And not to say that that is only at a FANG company, but I've heard so many horror stories about that. And I think this goes back to what we talked about, like the compass in your career roadmap. What are you looking for in your career?
Yeah.
And this again goes back to that idea of my job is there to get me paid so that I can do the things that I enjoy doing.
Yep.
And so I don't know, maybe we could talk a little bit about that too, because when we think about success and this idea that FANG is the only way to success, maybe looking back at this and saying like, how does one even start to write that roadmap? And obviously it's a personal thing, but I'm curious what type of advice you like to give so that people can decide like maybe FANG is right for me, or maybe
Yep.
FANG is not the right thing for me. What advice do you have for people who are looking to figure that out?
Yeah, I love this question. And so before you create a product roadmap for your career or this idea of a career roadmap, I also think it's really valuable to create like a life roadmap. And this is not something we do in my career coaching program, like per se. It's more part of my book. But I really recommend, at least in the book, like before you start thinking about that career roadmap, let's focus on your life roadmap because our jobs impact how much time we have, how much money we have, how much flexibility we have, impact our mood, our relationships, like so much. And so I think if you can create this concept of a life roadmap, really you could just think of it as like some deal breaker criteria that you want to either avoid or achieve in your life type thing. So maybe for some people, it's like, I want to be able to drop my kids off at school every morning and be available to like coach the soccer team, right? Someone else might be like, I want to be able to retire by the time I'm 50. Someone else might think, I need to be able to work from home because of XYZ reasons. And so when you just spend a little bit of time getting clearer on what you want your life to look like, and I know that can be ambiguous. So maybe think about it in terms of what would an ideal week in my life look like. That's going to help you start to identify some things that you would then want to look for in whatever job you get next. And I will caveat all that and say, like, I don't want people to think like, doesn't she know that everyone has bills to pay? Of course. Sometimes we will not have the luxury to go back and make decisions based on if we want to be able to coach the soccer team, right? Obviously. But I really encourage you to think about that at some point because it can really help inform decisions you make in your career.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy named Trevor Alexander a while ago, and he wrote a book called the An Ugly Design Career, and it's all about basically realizing that like you don't have to have this perfect FANG job to have a successful career. And he does a lot of coaching too. And one of the things he always asks his clients, which I think I love this, is what does a perfect day look like for you?
Yeah.
Like the way you answer that could absolutely change like your career trajectory. For instance, like a perfect day for me is waking up, making breakfast for my kids, taking them to school, just like you said, doing soccer practice and all that stuff. You're going to have to find a place that allows you the flexibility to take off in the middle of the day for something, or go and do volunteer for a party during the day at school, or field trips or something like that. Or you might say my perfect day is like walking down the steps of my high rise walk up in New York City, walking down to the coffee shop and walking to the office and taking the subway, whatever. That's like the perfect day for me.
Yeah.
This implies like many different things. Like a job is going to require certain things, and you're going to have to be in certain locations or not. And so that changes the companies you want to apply for. And maybe
Yeah.
you hadn't thought about this company. Oh, that I didn't know that company existed. Well, you wouldn't have known it. You hadn't gone and sought it out, right? So anyway, I love that. The other thing I want to talk about here is, as we're talking about these things, is we talked about metrics before as it relates to job search, but there's metrics there around how much time do I want to be away from my kids or with my kids, or
Yeah.
how much travel time Do I want to be expected to travel? Is there a max? Is there a limit? I will not travel more than 25%
Yeah.
a month or a quarter or whatever, right? And so
Yeah.
again, that changes like the jobs that you have, the jobs you want, the jobs you apply for. And then again, thinking back to the research, like what companies are looking for less than 25% travel? Which ones are looking for more than that? And so
Yeah.
is that the place for me? And how do you figure that out? Well, you got to talk to people who work there and do your user interviews and
Yeah.
things like that. And so anyway, I just, this metaphor keeps going and going. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I keep thinking about it.
Yeah, I like how you brought up thinking about travel time and things like that, because one place I think people can also get very hyper fixated is on the salary. And you have to also consider the total compensation package, right? Because it's not just about the literal salary number, it's also about the total package of benefits, of bonuses, of do they pay for your gym membership? Do they give you some commuting credit, like all of those things, right? And I think that is one of the reasons why when people ask me, show me data for before and after salaries, and they want to see what the potential return on investment, if you will, of having me help with their career or job search would be. And I say to them, like, I can show you before and after salaries, but some of these salaries do decrease. And I'm going to tell you why, because some people, number one, were overpaid to begin with and they know it. Number two, some people take a lower literal salary because the overall compensation package increased. Some people also take a lower salary because they know that that job they said yes to is going to give them a better quality of life, is going to afford them the opportunity to acquire skills, to fill a skill gap so they can actually get that other job they want 5 years from now. Total compensation package is a big one. And I think, too, that's a great example of, we didn't talk about job descriptions, but here's one little great tangent in that we all know descriptions are often cut and pasted and poorly written, right? So I often say asking clarifying questions about a job description is a great way to slide in to the email or LinkedIn messages of someone who is that hiring manager to then maybe start a conversation with them, right? And then if they reply, now you're on their radar, you've increased your visibility. And if you apply, maybe you get an interview because you're a familiar name or face. Who knows, right? That's just how it works.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like somebody will look at that and say, "That was a really thoughtful question,"
Yes.
versus
Yep.
you asked me what was already in the job. You could have Googled it. You could have looked like that was lazy.
Yes.
You're out. I just
Yeah.
needed a reason to cut one more person out of the 1,000 that applied. You're gone.
Yes.
So anyway, I love that, and also a familiar face. You see the avatar, especially on LinkedIn. That there's so much value there, and just that recency bias too, like being the
Yes.
most recent person they've talked to. So
Yes.
I love that. All right. So we've had you for a while, Sarah. This has been an awesome conversation. Obviously, for anybody listening who wants some hands on experience, you can join Sarah at the Career Strategy Lab, sign up, and actually have a career product manager. I love that, by the way, that
Yeah.
you like treat yourself that way. But I'm curious, before we get out of here, one last question. You've probably talked to thousands of people, hundreds of people, probably thousands, and people still don't take this advice and
Ugh.
still continue to just apply to 500 jobs, or they continue to just wait until their end of year review to ask for a promotion when it's already too late. What is like one just final advice that you would give people who like are not going to listen? What is that
Oof.
one thing that you want to just stress to hopefully get them to
Yeah.
change their behavior?
Okay, I'll give, can I give two?
Yeah, well, it's my show.
Okay.
I do what I want. Do two.
So one of them is more like at a macro level, in that you need to be documenting your work on an
Mm,
ongoing basis. You don't want to be laid off 6 months from now and have a portfolio you haven't touched in 4 years or
yeah.
4 months, even. And I'm not saying you need to have a perfect case study for every single thing you do you in terms of how you document this. If you want to write it in a Moleskine notebook, if you want to make a spreadsheet, if you want to make a Google Doc, whatever works for your brain, just make sure, I would say every Friday, take some time to write some notes about what you've done, maybe some praise you received, other things. And then I call it a career project diary, essentially just like having this kind of like breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah.
That will make updating everything easier later. The other really practical tip I have, and the mistake I see people make all of the time, is in their portfolio lacking hierarchy. And it blows my
Mm,
mind because to me, I think hierarchy is like this basic principle of design that
yeah.
I just think if I look at your portfolio and there's no hierarchy, what kind of interface are you going to make? You can't apply hierarchy to your portfolio. And the like really practical example I see is I just taught a portfolio workshop, one in August, one in September, and people's original portfolios did not have hierarchy, meaning on the slide of the presentation, it was just a lot of text all in one font size, or at the top of every slide, it only said in, let's imagine like a 24-point font or something, right? All it said was research, next slide, wireframes, next slide,
Yeah.
personas, right? And that those have hierarchy, but it's a total waste of space. So I would say hierarchy and headlines, meaning don't just have a word that says like personas or research, have a sentence at the top that summarizes what that slide is about. And this is not specific to portfolios. Any well designed presentation does this. It makes me a little concerned in that I think people are so focused on the trendy stuff like software and animation and AI and all this stuff that we have lost a lot of basic design principles, like pure graphic and design principles. And I would argue maybe it's starting to come through in the literal products we use because I could have a whole YouTube channel of me. It would be X rated because I'd be swearing all the time of trying to use products. And I'm like, this team clearly was more focused on the radius of that stupid thing, how many clicks it's taking me to do this, or the hierarchy of this page.
Amen.
Rant over. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, please go for it. Yeah, I'm giving you a soapbox. Go ahead. But yeah, the that's funny too. And like again, like this is something that like it's not just for design. I mean, this is what a hiring manager is looking at the thing that you are presenting.
Yeah.
And they are saying, if I hire this person and I ask them to present design decisions to stakeholders,
Yeah.
what will that work look like? And if they see that on the screen and they see that in your presentation, they're going to say, clearly, this person doesn't understand the concept of storytelling.
Yep.
Clearly, this person does not understand the concept of influence and changing behavior and all that stuff. And they're going to say, out, you're
Yeah.
done. So, anyway, I love that. And it's, again, UXing ourselves. Would you actually do that in a presentation?
I don't know, maybe I'm just like too detail oriented or something, but even like an email that you send to someone or a LinkedIn message that you send to someone, if it is 15 lines of text all together in a wall of text and you didn't break it up into like little chunks of little paragraph chunks and stuff, and it's just looks like an encyclopedia. I mean, it annoys me. Maybe it doesn't annoy anyone else, but I just think there's so many opportunities there's so many touch points where you have a chance to make or break someone's first impression about you. And I think partially out of time and pressure, self-inflicted pressure and stuff, people are just making mistakes at a lot of these touch points.
Personally, I feel like it's human behavior. It's just the way humans behave. But a lot of times we get laid off, for instance, we're stressed out,
Yep.
right? We rush, we're worried, we focus on all these other things, and we just lose sight of the things that are actually impacting the situation even more because we're like, oh, I got to just send an application. I got to send applications. I got to send applications. And you're stressed out and you're not putting the thought and effort into it because it's just already a stressful situation, which
Yeah.
it's a downward spiral. It makes it more stressful. Go longer without a job. You get more stressed out. Then you worry less about the little small details that actually are important. And, you think just, oh, I'll send 100 more resumes, 100 more resumes this week. And it never works. All right. Well, hopefully we're going to help a few people. Again, like, I'm curious. Maybe you have this metric or not. You probably don't track this. But out of all the people you've talked to and coached over the years, do you get a sense like how many people actually take your advice and actually do it versus don't?
I would
I'm curious.
say,
Even the people who pay, they pay and they start. Yeah, I'd still
yeah.
be surprised how many people pay and just
Yeah.
don't
I
actually
mean,
do anything with it.
if I just had to like gut reaction, the people that join Career Strategy Lab and like are able to have success, where success is not always get hired because some people are joining proactively to be ready in case they need, because they want to do this now. Well, they don't have the pressure of their bank account and the time and everything after a layoff. So I would say probably like 90% of people follow the advice, and 10% who don't, I wish they would. And at the same time, like, you can lead the horse to water, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. There's something to be said about the people paying for something.
Yes.
When we offer free advice, like this show, for instance, somebody pays for this. Most people just ignore it. I used to be on ADP list.
Hmm.
And not to throw shade at ADP list because I don't think the platform is to blame, but because no one's paying for any of that stuff. I can't tell you how many times I have calls where people would argue with me. And I'm like, you asked me for advice. Like, what is the point of this call? You just wasted both of our time. So
Yeah.
anyway, that kind of stuff happened all the time with free, but paying for it, I think is different. Hopefully, if you're paying for it, for the love of God, use it.
Yeah. And I think people are also pay for the accountability. Not that I'm going to like show up at your house and ask you why you didn't do something, but more the self accountability. Like, I've hired coaches, whether it's for marathons or business. And I just think to myself, I paid for this person's advice. I'm going to just get as much out of this as I can. And I actually follow through versus.
I love that. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I stopped doing like the free mentoring and stuff. I just found like to be a total waste of time for everybody. It's like if you're not paying for it, you don't really care, and that's my honest opinion. If you really cared about something, you would invest in it. It's beneficial for everybody. All right, Sarah. So
Yeah.
I have what a way to close that out. Actually, what's interesting when we think about like career and like UX. Like a lot of people, like some people are self-taught. Like I'm self-taught. I've never taken a design class, but I also started doing UX design like almost 15, 20 years ago when
Hmm.
there wasn't a lot. But I also like see this again, like, people would pay, you invest in learning a thing, you invest in stuff. And so when it comes to careers and not even, I wouldn't even say just job search coaching. I just think like career coaching, paying for that and investing in that service to get an outside perspective, to better yourself and to find those blind spots like we talked about. I think it's incredibly beneficial, whether that's like paying for, you specifically or anybody else out there that is a career coach. You wouldn't like just try to switch careers without paying for something like it. I feel like it's the same thing again, like trying to apply like that UX analogy. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch,
No,
but
it's
I
not.
think it's like really important to think about it. Trying to do this for free on your own is so much more stressful.
Yeah.
Or trying to do it on your own is so much more stressful. I found that paying people to help guide me to like an example, like I'm getting into voice acting right now, and I tried for a year to do it myself.
Uh-huh.
Total waste of time. Like paying for like coaches that can hold my hand a little bit and guide me and teach me and show me. It's so much better. And I think your own career is again like a career coach. If you got the money, if you're making an insane amount of money, and a lot of product designers are, invest back in yourself
Yeah.
and pay for it. I just think it's so important.
And
So,
and there's the concept of compound interest, right? I also think there's the element of compound action, but specifically to compound interest, I think if you can increase your salary by 5 figures, which is the average that we see for people who get hired, that has a long-term effect on your not only your future salaries, but also like your ability to pay off debt or invest for retirement or do whatever you're going to do with your money. So that's one thing that we've heard people say. I didn't realize the compound impact that this would have because they did my career coaching 2 years ago. Now they've been promoted 1 or 2 times, and like the amount their salary has increased is way more than what they paid me.
absolutely. I love that. All right, Sarah. So we've had you for quite a while. I was good, started to do this and then I got sidetracked, and that's my fault.
This was
Do you
great.
have time? Do you have time to stick around for 5 simple little questions I
Yes.
like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better?
Yeah.
All right, we'll get through this quick. First up, first thing comes to your mind. I don't have to think too hard about it. What is your favorite non-design book?
Ooh. I love a French book called Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince.
Yes. Oh, I love that book.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually have that. So
I speak French. I grew up in Canada and we had to read it, every year for a number of years. And my takeaway is don't lose childlike perspective.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book. Actually, the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, one of his quote about building a ship, I use it all the time. I think it's
Yes.
a perfect metaphor for UX design. And don't drum up people, teach them along for the vast and endless sea. Anyway, love that book. I
Mhm.
have that book for my kids. Fantastic. And next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Ooh, gosh, that is a tricky one. I need to pull up Spotify to see. There's so many here. I have a lot of business ones. Let's go to the podcasts tab.
Which are most listened to?
Um,
The first one that pops up thinks you want to listen to.
First, oh, I love Armchair Expert with Dax
Oh, yeah.
Shepard.
I
He's
love him.
such a good interviewer. He has a degree in anthropology. He's just
I didn't know
excellent
that.
conversationalist. Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love that. That's my road trip podcast. My
Yeah.
wife and I listen to that one. That's she's. I would like. I want to listen to like history podcasts or like UX podcasts, and she's like, no, I don't want to listen to either one of those. It's like that one's the one we listen to on road trips because we can both agree when the kids have their headphones on and aren't screaming at each other.
Right.
All right. Next up, what is your favorite meal?
Ooh. I it depends, but I would say right now I love a good like fresh homemade carbonara. I just I had an amazing one in Italy once and I can just close my eyes and almost taste it sometimes. Whenever I'm somewhere in Europe where I can find a little Italian joint, it's my go-to.
Yeah. Do you ever make it yourself?
I haven't tried, but I should.
Yeah, I have a buddy who makes it, and it takes like some practice because you got to get the egg yolks and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and it's easy to mess it up, but keep whisking. Anyway,
Yeah.
I haven't tried to make it myself, but I had a buddy who like swears up and down it's like the easiest thing. But I've seen videos online. I'm like, that looks scary. I don't know. I'm not gonna try. All right, next up, what is your favorite vacation spot? I
Oh.
know you like to do a lot of skiing. I probably have to know this.
Yeah, I love mountains and oceans equally, but I love skiing. Mountain, preferably an off the grid ski lodge where there's not tons of people and I can just ski infinite powder all day long. I've done a trip like that for a couple of times and it's magical. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you find the ski lodge that's like off the beaten path? Do you have like
Yeah,
a special
it
tip?
it was just friends of friends. Essentially, I fell into this friend group and they've been going to this lodge that's been operating for 50 years in Canada and someone dropped out and I got invited and now I'm first on the wait list in case people drop out.
I love it.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
it's so much fun.
That is awesome. Well, don't share the name. We don't
No,
want it to.
it's
We
top
don't want to
secret.
ruin it. Yeah, we don't want to ruin it. All right.
No.
What is your favorite design tool that's not Figma? Last question.
I am a really tactile person. I still draw stuff out, whether it's on my iPad or on a notebook or I have a whiteboard over here in my office. I just find devices are so distracting to me. And I process ideas really well, literal hand to paper.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's a common theme. Whiteboards, pen, paper,
Yeah.
all that's. I totally agree. I love that. I invested probably way more than I should in an actual pen. I bought this
Okay.
pen and I carry it around with me everywhere.
Wait, what does
But
the
I always
pen
had a pen.
do? It's like a
Oh,
ink pen?
it's just a regular pen.
Oh,
Yeah, it was $80, but it's
okay.
the James brand, and it's like the perfect weight. It's
Wait.
aluminum.
Hmm.
And it's thin because I have a lot
Okay.
of pens that are like really thick.
Yeah.
I have like this like pen that I got. Well, I don't have it here. Oh, here it is. This is another one. I can't remember the brand, but it's just really thick, and this
Mm.
one's really thin. And I don't know. It fits in my pocket really well. I don't know. I just love this pen. It's a
Pens
great
are a
pen.
really
Actually,
specific thing. Yeah.
yeah, I lost it once, and I had to buy a new one, and I was very upset because it was very expensive. And I thought, oh, if I spent a lot of money on a pen, I'll keep
Yeah.
better track of it. Not true. Not true at all. All right, Sarah. So this has been a joy talking to you for a little bit. Before we get out of here, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you
Yeah.
and sign up for your course and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm very easy. I have a website, sarahdoody.com, which has more of my UX consulting and speaking and stuff. And then I have careerstrategylab.com, which is the world of all the UX career coaching I do. You can find pages, whether you're a mid, a senior, a switcher, a junior. There's various ways to work with me, and you can find all that. And I just checked this morning, this is a mind blowing statistic, but I have a UX case study template, and according to my email tool, 29,000 people have opted
Wow.
into it
Holy
since
crap. That's awesome.
it launched, like probably in 2017 or something. The case study template is linked on our resources page, and I'll send you a link for the show notes too.
Yeah, we'll include all that stuff in the show notes. You check that out at beyonduxdesign.com. Sarah, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you coming on. We had this conversation guide. I think we talked about like 10%.
Well, I'll have to
What
come
to
back
talk about, but
if it
yeah,
works
absolutely.
sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to have you back on. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jeremy.